Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with the general counsel of a little quiet company known as the 800-pound gorilla in cybersecurity. Glean from his legal career and laugh with us as he shares his boat story. You will not want to miss it. Just a reminder, the PDF transcript of this audio is available to download. Go to liongrouprerecruiting.com/podcast. As many of you know, we interview corporate defense, law firm leaders, partners, general counsel, and legal consultants. You are listening to episode 34 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of both men and women serving as leaders and executives in the legal industry. Enjoy a front row seat as Chris Batts speaks with general counsel, legal consultants, and law firm leaders and law partners at the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Bill Croutch, General Counsel of Optiv. Bill began his legal career in private practice at a Kansas City business boutique with the intention of going in-house. It was not long before he was serving legal roles in well-known Kansas City brands and employers, which include the Global Seaboard Corporation and Euronet. His foray into the cybersecurity industry began with joining the legal team of FishNet. After the merger of Accuvant in 2015, FishNet became Optiv, and Bill became the EVP, General Counsel, Board Secretary, and Chief Privacy Officer. Bill received his law degree from Drake University Law School and bachelor's from Arizona State University. Welcome, Bill, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here. Look forward to speaking with you.
Bill, do my audience a favor and explain what Optiv is, because the customers or clients of Optiv are very familiar, obviously, but most of us are not.
Optiv is the largest global pure cybersecurity provider in the world. It provides a number of solutions as it relates to breaches. Anytime you look at the news today, you find out that there's a breach in a particular company. Optiv provides technology. So we resell technology, and we also provide services. So we go in and do incident response, we do penetration testing, we do a number of different things.
And I saw it somewhere. Does Optiv's customers represent a large portion of the Fortune 100 as well as a large portion of the Fortune 1000?
Yeah, we have the privilege of being exposed to a large number of clients, and we represent, I think it's around 85% of the Fortune 100. And around 70% of the Fortune 1000.
That's amazing. And you guys are considered the largest in the world for cybersecurity.
Yes.
That's amazing. Here's a question. I mean, you bring up this very sensitive word. Obviously, you're in an industry that's constantly evolving. So explain to my customers, how has cybersecurity evolved and where is it headed, Bill?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen the shift. Incidentally, I've been working at Optiv for about 10 years. So I've been in cybersecurity for as long. And my first 5 years or so, it was all about technology. Who could buy the fanciest new product that would solve all their problems? And I noticed a shift about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was a shift that occurred over a couple of years, where our customers were like, we don't want to keep spending money on technology. Every year, it seems like I have to spend another $100,000 on a new program or a new software package. I'm tired of doing it. My budgets are being capped out. I'm being asked to spend less money. The CISOs are being told they can't spend as much money, that they can't keep buying product year after year. And so customers came to us and said, we want a better solution. We want you to take a more holistic view and show us the value. Show us some value that you can provide us, not just a software package. And so our resale business became less important, even though it's still important, and our services business became more important. And that is, we were providing more services to customers. And we've seen a shift from just providing technology to providing more of a holistic services approach.
It's fascinating. I mean, it almost sounds like Apple, where their business models shifted to services. If you're allowed to allude to what services, I mean, you guys outsourcing the SWAT teams of the cyber industry in-house? Is it more people versus tech doing it?
Yeah, we do what we call plan, build, and run. We plan, we can do your entire protection right up front. We build it. We can have people on site to actually build the programs that protect your company from the hackers. And as you've seen, especially with Russia lately, hackers have become more prevalent. It's become more of a trophy. I broke into Target. I broke into Home Depot, announcing it and literally bragging about it. When you combine that with the dark web, incidentally, I found out the other day that all my information's on the dark web.
Oh, wow.
Here I am, General Counsel of Optiv Security, one of the biggest cybersecurity companies in the world, and my information is on the dark web. I mean, that's just unbelievable. And then plan, build, and then run. We help companies maintain their system. We have programs that monitor a company's systems, and we're informed when there are issues, and we can go and follow up on those issues. So we really tried to provide the entire package. We're the only company that does that. There's a lot of companies like CDW that go and provide the resale product. They'll go on and sell all the technology that I mentioned earlier. There's the consulting companies that provide all the consulting and the services side, like E&Y and PwC. But we're the only company that does the whole thing. So we can provide a customer with a number of solutions. We don't just sell one product. We have 300 or 400 different partners that we can look to figure out what specifically is the best solution for a particular company. What Apple needs can be quite a bit different than what like a U-Haul would need. Mm-hmm. And so we can select from many different partners and have access to many different solutions for a particular company.
Bill, I mean, when we think of cybersecurity, this is the new form of arms race, I guess. And not to necessarily just use that on the analogy, but leap 5-10 years ahead from now, what is this all going to look like?
That's a good question. I would have guessed that Russia would have taken a more active part. Look at what's going on right now with what Russia's trying to influence with our own social media.
Yeah.
Now, where are we going to be in 5 years? I think there's going to be more hackers. I think people are going to be doing more from their bedrooms. I think we will not only be hacked, or people will be hacked from the Russias and the Syrias and the Irans of the world, but I think we're going to have a lot more domestic hacking. Individuals that brag and feel confident that they can break into systems. And I think that's just going to continue and I think only get worse. And it's going to be difficult for companies that don't have solutions in place and are ready for it to protect themselves.
I'm an NPR listener, and I recently heard an interview of an author that wrote the book, The Fifth Domain, Defending Our Country, Our Companies, and Ourselves in the Age of Cyber Threats. Have you read it? Have you heard of it?
I have not.
And one of the conclusions he has in the book he talks about is this push on the federal hill, in essence, of trying to have a single solution for cybersecurity for the local governments for voting and to protect the vulnerability of the voting systems. Is that something you guys are looking into, or do you have any opinions about the vulnerability of local governments from a national perspective, almost nationalizing the voting system?
Yeah, we do have customers that are both state and local entities, federal also. And I think as it relates to what's going on right now in Russia, it would be great to have a single solution, but I don't really know if we're going to have one that's going to adequately protect all our systems.
Yeah.
You're going back to the Chads days, right? The hanging Chad. In some ways, counting ballots manually is the safest way of doing it. You computerize anything nowadays, and there's a chance that somebody can break into it.
Bill, from a global perspective, what else do you see out there? Who else is innovating in the cybersecurity space?
From a global perspective, we do have a global aspect of Optiv. We are in the UK, we're in Canada, we're in India. We're looking at other areas to expand on. Global cybersecurity is a bit different than how it's handled here in the United States. Overseas and in Europe, it's more segmented. It's smaller mom-pop companies that manage it. From our perspective, or at least from Optiv's perspective, it's tougher to break into markets. We were just looking at a number of entities in the UK and in Spain and different areas. And it's tough to break into that market because they're segmented. They're more broken up into smaller companies. And as it relates to how they manage it over there, it's a little bit more difficult to say. And it's probably something, Chris, I don't want to get into, if you don't mind.
Understand. I'd actually welcome your thoughts as far as like politically. So from the EU, how the EU has been taking leadership and rolling out GDPR and wanting to protect their people. Do you see the US stepping up for privacy in the US, or do you see that more so a leadership perspective, regulators coming from the EU?
I think the U.S. is stepping up. I think the GDPR is a good thing. We actually have a big practice in our own company that is GDPR oriented. We have a number of specialists that do nothing but GDPR. I also have an attorney who works for me that specializes in GDPR compliance, and she spends a lot of her day on handling our GDPR compliance as it relates to contracts and things like that. I think the United States government could do more from a privacy perspective. You certainly see it in the news every day where people are much more concerned about their privacy. I myself am much more concerned about my own personal privacy, knowing that what happened to me with the dark web and my family's personal privacy. So I think the United States is doing a lot. I think it could do a lot more.
Bill, I wanted to ask you a question about the business of cybersecurity. And I want to mention one word, and you'll know where I'm going with this. But how does insurance play a part in the business model of Optiv and or cybersecurity in the United States?
It's an interesting question as it relates to insurance. I mean, a lot of companies that we work with would like Optiv to be their insurance company. In essence, we are insuring them from any breaches going forward. And although we provide solutions, we're not an insurance company. Insurance companies are providing that insurance. I managed the entire insurance portfolio for Optiv, and we went through that insurance renewal process, and part of that was cybersecurity. Interesting enough, it's the most expensive insurance that you could potentially buy nowadays because it could be catastrophic if a company is breached. It's millions and millions of dollars, loss of business, lost profits. It could be catastrophic for a company. So I don't know even how affordable that type of insurance is for companies. That's why, quite frankly, companies use Optiv. One of the great things about Optiv is that we're in the business of cybersecurity. We're also in the business of protecting ourselves. And, I'm happy to say that we have not been breached.
Yeah, that has a lot to say. Okay, so let's shift to profession and legal industry. Actually, if we're going to be talking about breaches, I mean, what advice would you give law firms? Because our audience is very obviously legal executive driven in both corporate legal departments, regulators, and legal executives within law firms. What advice would you give legal executives of law firms, and you could say legal departments, around cybersecurity, Bill?
Obviously don't get breached. I personally had one of our law firms, I got a letter saying that they were breached. Law firms, they have confidential information, sometimes the most sensitive information about a particular company's aspects, business, IP, things like that. And if there is a breach, it would cause a great deal of concern to the general counsels of what information was seen by that hacker. We have a number of clients that are law firms. I think the law firms, dare I say, were slow to react to the initial breaches of maybe 5-10 years ago. They are certainly caught up now. And some of the law firms that I know, that I work with, are more protected than a lot of the companies that I'm aware of. And I think it's one of the things that a lot of the law firms have their own CISOs now, their own IT departments. When I started practicing law back in 1996 and joined a law firm that's now merged out and is now part of a much bigger firm, the only time I talked to somebody in an IT was to set up my laptop. And that was it. We didn't have an IT department. We certainly didn't have our own CISO. Now you will see law firms, especially the larger ones, have full-fledged IT departments with their own CISO.
And you've said CISO several times, Chief Security Officer?
Yeah, Chief Information and Security Officer.
Okay. And our hope is that's not an attorney, correct?
That's not an attorney. Okay. Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
So this podcast is about leadership. And I wanted to ask you the question, how do you approach leadership in running your legal department?
Well, I would say I'm hands-off. I have 12 people that work for me. Of that 12, 6 are attorneys and 6 are paralegals. I like to think I have a happy team. I believe in my team. I have my team's back. I like to think I lead by example. So, where it comes to work ethic and time, I'm in here all the time. I believe work hard, play hard, meaning my team is extremely busy at quarter end. Companies in my line of business tend to be busy at quarter end, especially later in the year. So when that's over, if people want to take time off, I allow it. And I certainly don't watch people's schedules. I treat everybody, we're all adults here. So I like to think that I do take an active interest in each of my team members. I do want to make sure that they're engaged, that they're happy, that they like the culture of Optiv, which is a little different than maybe other companies. And that's all really important to me.
Bill, you've hired a fair amount of people in your career. What do you generally look for when you're hiring attorneys for your legal teams? And I'll kind of segue that is, what kind of advice can you give people who would consider leaving private practice and who want to go in-house? So it's kind of a two-part question.
First thing I look at for is their prior experience. What did they do? I always like somebody with a few years of law firm experience. I think you got to cut your teeth at a law firm before you go in-house. And so I like to see somebody like myself. I was at a law firm a couple of years before I jumped in-house. It doesn't need to be 5-10 years. It could just be a couple of years. I like to see that experience was hands-on. You didn't just carry your partner's briefcase around the room. You actually did things. And I hire a varied type of lawyer. It's not just what you would call a corporate lawyer or a generalist. I have some litigators. I have some intellectual property types. I have corporate counsel and then some contract reviewers. So I hire a very different person. I like them to be go-getters. I like them to be excited about what they do. I want somebody engaged. So when I interview somebody, I look for somebody that has a lot of energy, somebody that's excited about the practice of law, excited about going in-house. Working in-house is quite a bit different than working in a law firm, and it's an adjustment. In most cases, I think it's a good adjustment and an adjustment that people look forward to. You're not counting your hours. You don't have billable hours. You don't have the pressure of going to have to pound the pavement to go find clients. But it's an adjustment. One of the biggest adjustments is you're not around lawyers all the time. One of the great things I remember when I was practicing law is I had lawyers all around me, and I'd go walk around and talk to people, got different perspectives, had different experiences, different specialties. I had a bankruptcy question. I went and talked to the bankruptcy person. When you go in-house, you're kind of your own lawyer. You kind of got to become your own expert. And you also got to get to know the company. And you got to love the industry. And so I look for a lot of those things when I interview somebody. And quite frankly, usually within the first 10, 15 minutes, I know if I like somebody or not.
How would you define the value that a legal department brings? Because there's definitely been an evolution of perspective of the C-suite of the legal department, Bill. And I know this is an important personal thing for you as you've seen this in the evolution. But would you share with my listeners your perspective on the importance of the legal department with corporations?
Yeah, it is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. When I was younger, I think the general perception was that legal departments were necessary evils, if you even had one. If you had one, it was a necessary evil. It was perceived to be a point of bottleneck. Things would slow down in the legal department. The legal department just wants to redline contracts. And it was an impairment to business. It slowed the business down. And that is an absolute issue with me because I generally believe, as biased as I am, because I am general counsel, that a legal department is one of the single most important departments of a company. There are a number of ways a legal department can add value to a company. One of the biggest is partnering with your other departments. So, my team partners with sales and services. We have a sales group that is the technology side, which I mentioned earlier, that resells technology. And we have a services group that provides the services, the pen testing, IMs, things like that. And my team doesn't just review contracts. They don't just get involved, take a contract, review it, redline it, and give it back. We actually get involved with the customer, the client. We negotiate directly with the customer. We don't just try to get every provision and say it's this or the highway. We try to understand the customer's business. And we work with the business partner, the sales or services side, to get the deal done. That partnership is extremely important. And the only way contract gets signed and gets signed quickly, and I'm proud to say that Optiv, we have a very quick turnaround time. The individual, Jack Wayne, who runs my contracts department, does a great job, and so does the entire contracts team, to turn around contracts in a relatively short period of time. Could be just a couple of days. We get about 500-600 contracts a month here. So we see a lot of contracts. Wow. That's really important. There's a number of other areas, for example, claims and litigation. I mean, you generally think, and there's some CEOs out there that generally think, okay, well, I'll get a lawyer when we have a claim and when we're sued. You know, in my opinion, that's the latest you get a lawyer involved. You should be getting somebody involved early. We have an issue with one of our clients, and it's not a really bad issue, but it's a dispute. And instead of waiting for it to escalate to a claim or a demand letter, I involve somebody from my team to see if we can work something out. Get involved, find out what's wrong, find out what the miscommunication is, and see if we can come to a good resolution that we keep the customer happy, we keep the business, and we fix the issue before it gets to a demand letter. And a lot of that is because my team knows our business and they know our customers. And so, you know, it's difficult to show value from a financial perspective when you run a legal department. And that's one of the frustrating things. I can't show revenue. I don't bill our time. We don't track our time. We don't bill our respective departments for time. We're not a revenue center. Unfortunately, we're that dreaded cost center. But there is a lot of value, tangible value that a legal department can point to. It just can't point from a dollar perspective. Sure, there's ways from a bankruptcy to a good settlement to where you can show, well, you know, these guys wanted $100,000. We negotiate hard and we got it done for $40,000. But it's really hard to point to a dollar value. But there's so many intangibles that a legal department can provide a company to show value. And some of those areas I've shared with you. I mean, there's a lot of others.
Bill, what led you to become an attorney?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So I graduated with a finance degree at Arizona State. My last year of college, my dad had a job ready for me at Intel to work in their finance department. I did not want to follow my father to Intel. I just wanted to do something on my own. So I thought, okay, there's medical school, there's an MBA, and there's law school. There was a few law school shows on at the time. I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't I apply to law school? I didn't take science. I wasn't really into science, so medical school was out. So it was really either an MBA or a law degree. I chose a law degree. I had no intentions of going to become a lawyer. I certainly did not want to do that. I thought a law degree would enhance my resume and make me maybe more attractive from a business perspective. Little did I know that when I was in law school, I fell in love with the law. I took some corporate classes, some business classes. I did really well. You know, I would call myself an average college student, but in law school, I did really well. I tend to be a very competitive person. In law school is extremely competitive. Our law school, I went to Drake University, which is a private school. They teach the Socratic method, which is a very intense way of going to law school. I thrived it. I loved it. I lived it. You know, I'm an avid reader and like a show every now and then. I stopped reading. I stopped going to movies, and all I did was focus on law school for 3 years. And I got lucky. I did very well in law school, and I had a job before I even graduated from law school. So it ended up turning out pretty well for me.
Bill, let's talk about the family. You're married and you have 2 kids. Is that correct?
Yep. I have a son, Jared, who is 19, who is starting his second year at Kansas University. And I have a daughter, 11, who just started 6th grade at Harmony Middle School.
That's excellent. And your wife works for MRI, doing what?
She works at Midwest Research Institute. She is a scientist there. She is, I think, what they call a section manager. She's got more degrees than I do. I believe, and I'm sure she'll get on me if I'm wrong, but she's got a PhD in toxicology and a master's in biology or biochemistry. She is what I am not. I hated science. I couldn't even take biology in high school. I think I failed it. And my wife is the perfect scientist. So we're opposites attract.
That's awesome. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do for fun in the summer. Being that you're in Kansas City, my assumption is that you guys have something at a lake.
Yeah, we have a condo down at the Lake of the Ozarks. We've had it for a couple of years now. It's great. It allows us to get out of town. And more importantly, with everything that's going on nowadays, social media, iPads, iPhones, I get home at night and everybody's got their iPads or they're in front of their computers, and we just don't spend as much time as I would want as a family. When we go down to the lake, we're focused on each other. We all go down there and we actually communicate. Actually, we have a boat. We try to go out to the boat. My claim to fame is I've only been down there 2 years, and I've sunk 2 boats in 2 years. I had my boat that I brought with me down there, and I found a way to sink that. And then shortly thereafter, I bought a bigger boat, thinking maybe the size of the boat is why I sunk the first one. Well, apparently there's no correlation to stupidity as it relates to managing a boat. And I found a way to sink the second boat about 6 months later. So I do not have a third boat, and I have no plans on buying a third boat.
Do I have permission to ask how you actually did that with the 2 boats?
Yes, you do. It just makes me look even worse, but that's fine. I'm okay. The first one, I had it maintenance before I took it down to the lake, and I put it in the water. We drove it to our slip. We have a slip in our complex. Unbeknownst to me, the plugs were out and not put back, and they should always be put back. Probably should have checked that before I put it in the water, but I did not.
No.
Ended up driving it to the slip. We have actually a lift on our boat. So when I got it to the slip, I put it on the lift. It went right up. Saw nothing, no problem. It was on the lift. It wasn't sinking at that stage. Next morning, went down, took the lift down, tied it up so it was just floating there. Decided to run upstairs and get the kids and get everything to bring it down. By the time I got back down, it was under the water sitting on top of the lift.
Oh, wow.
So that was boat number 1. Boat number 2 was a bit more dramatic because the boat was bigger, a 37-foot Sea Ray Sunrider. And in that case, I was told that because of the lake and because of the size of my boat, I did not have to winterize my boat. So I did not winterize my boat. Well, apparently that was stupid advice, and I shouldn't have listened to it. And what happened is around October, November, when things started getting really cold, a couple of tubes froze up in the back of my boat, and we had a dry, warm spell. It then unfroze and popped, causing the leaks, and the back of my boat sunk. And interesting, we were not there because it's a condo. We obviously go down, maybe every other weekend or once a month. We got a phone call from a neighbor I did not know, and I'll never forget it. It was a voicemail. I still have it on my phone to remind me of my stupidity. And on that voicemail, he basically says, I don't know if I have the right number, but I think your boat is sinking. You may want to call me. So Saturday morning, I wake up with that voicemail, call him. He sends me a video, and yes, that is my boat that is sinking. So had to rush down there, hire a service to lift it out. It's been serviced ever since. It's still in with the mechanic.
Oh, wow. I am so sorry. Bill, let's transition to something you shared with me today that was the dynamic of your neighbor and a perspective on a hot topic right now. So there was a recent shooting in Kansas City. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, unfortunately, a young girl, 25-year-old girl named Erin, was shot at the crossroads. She was there at an art festival, I believe, with her boyfriend, and not anywhere near the event or the dispute that caused the shooting. I think she was maybe 200-300 feet away from it and was just sitting there in front of a food truck, and she was shot apparently in the head. And, she's a neighbor of ours, been a neighbor for a number of years, ever since we've actually moved into the neighborhood. She's got a wonderful family. It's been very devastating for the neighborhood. I tend to be conservative on my gun rights. But when you have incidents like that hit very close to home, it tends to change your opinion. It's a really tragic and a horrible event, and it's impacted my entire neighborhood. If there's anything good that's come out of it, it's the fact that I didn't realize how great it was to live in Kansas, and specifically in Johnson County and in my neighborhood. The neighborhood has gotten behind the family. has been extremely supportive of the family, and I've been really proud to be part of that neighborhood. But it's a tragic event for everybody, especially for her family.
Yeah. Bill, let's transition to this topic of reading in your basement. I have discovered that you're an avid reader, and we relate on a lot of levels to that. So please share with my audience. So generally speaking, and I'll just tee this up for everyone else that knows and listens to my episodes, I like asking my guests to share books they recommend or authors and just kind of elaborate about what they tend to keep on their nightstand.
Yes, I am an avid reader. My wife would tell you that I probably read too much. I do read in the basement. I read in the living room. I read everywhere I can. I also am an avid audiobook listener. So whenever I am driving or whenever I am running, I listen to an audiobook. You can look over me and I'll be driving my car and I'll be reacting to something that's happened in an audiobook and people will be freaking out thinking that I'm having some attack. Right. But I love reading. I tend to read science fiction and fantasy. One of the authors that I absolutely love is Robert Jordan. He has written the Wheel of Time books. What I'm very proud of is I told my son, I said, if you would just read the first book, you'll love the book and you'll want to read the rest. And now he's, I believe, on book 6, and he just started them probably a month ago. And these books, for those that aren't aware, they're about 1,000 pages long.
Oh, wow.
I mean, these are big books. So I also tend to read multiple books at the same time. One may keep my attention to a certain point, and then I want to go read something a little different. So I'll have maybe The Expanse, with James Corey, that series. I believe I'm on book 7 for that one. And then I'll have Wheel of Time, Robert Jordan, and I'll be on book 8 of that one, and I'll spend 2 or 3 days on one, take a break, go to the other. I tend not to read one book from the beginning to the very end. I tend to read multiple books at one time.
I think you and I read very similarly, having lots of books and genres. I really enjoy those genres as well. Last question, final question, Bill. What is the one book you would have with you if you were stuck on an island?
That's a great question. God, and there's so many books. I'd want it to be very long. Not one of these 300-400 pagers. It'd have to be one of the 1,000 pagers. I'd have to say Eye of the World, book 1 of the Wheel of Time series.
Bill, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Pleasure's been all mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you have questions or would like to recommend someone to be on the podcast, please email them to podcast@findthelions.com. If you like this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes. Also, share our podcast via email or social media. To share our podcast, listen to more shows, or to read the transcription of this audio, go to liongroup.recruiting.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.